Good evening. It is November 29th, 2012. This is Jason Horak reporting on the Dodge Daytona electric vehicle. As you may note, it has been a couple weeks since my last video, where I had started bottom balancing each of the cells in my 60 cell CALB 180 battery pack. And I was going through one by one and bringing them all down to 2.8 volts. That was the goal. Anyway, went through the front battery pack, got that finished okay. Even got the 4 batteries that are in the mid battery box balanced without a problem. And then when I moved to the rear battery pack, an incident happened. And Jack Rickard says that I have a special talent when it comes to breaking things, and it was no exception. What I had ended up doing was, as I was moving the terminals from one battery to the next, I dropped the lead and it fell somewhere in the middle of the pack. What that caused was, instead of seeing the 3 volts on the PowerLab that it was expecting, it got a sudden surge of up to 30 volts, again depending on where it fell on the pack. And it was just a quick split-second thing, but it was enough to blow both fuses in the cables, because they had these 40 amp fuses that were kind of in the middle of the cable. Actually, they were here where you can see the spots. And both of those fuses blew, and the unit itself was damaged. So this is actually the old one that happened to. So it still functions. It powers on, and you can hook up the laptop to it and program it and flash the firmware and all that good stuff. But when you hook it up to a power source, like to the 12 volt battery there, what happens is it comes back with an error message that battery is below 50% state of charge, and that it's not going to work even though the battery is fully charged. So it somehow broke the voltage sensor on the supply side of things. I'm not sure if that's also the cause, but when you try to use the unit to charge a battery or discharge, like one of these little 3 volt batteries, it fails and it throws an error code, and it's all over but the crying. So anyway, I managed to fry a PowerLab. So I contacted the company, that Riva Electrics, that I purchased this from. I bought it directly from their website quite some time ago, sometime in the middle of the summer anyway, and left a message with their technical support people. I emailed their technical support with a full list of exactly what happened, and was basically just asking for, hey, I broke it, help, how do I fix this thing, can I send it back for kind of a repair, obviously at my cost because I broke it, etc. And a week and a half later, I still have not received any kind of word from them. It's possible that they're just busy. Last week was Thanksgiving, so maybe people were out on vacation and stuff, but I was kind of expecting to get at least some kind of yes, we got your email, we'll get back to you as soon as we can, or a call back. I left them all my contact information and my cell phone and everything. Nothing. So I'm not sure if I'll ever hear back from them, but in the meantime, I really needed to continue bottom balancing my battery pack, so I ended up shelling out another $260 to buy a replacement. So that arrived just a couple days ago, and of course I ordered it next day air last week on Tuesday, and it got here this week on Tuesday, or Wednesday. Wednesday. No, it was Tuesday. But anyway, so the holidays, you gotta love it. So anyway, so what I had done was, rather than utilize the fuses and solder in those 40 amp fuses, I actually put 2 automotive 40 amp circuit breakers in here, and again, it's probably a little hard to see, but it's a little circuit breaker And then I wrapped it in plastic so that it can, touch terminals and so forth and not be a problem because it's all encased in plastic. Leaving the ends open so that there's airflow and, it's not going to get too hot in that plastic. So I'm sure that circuit breakers don't work as well as the fuses, but, I figured I'd give it a try. What's the worst that can happen? I'll break another one of these things. So I've been very, very careful with it. And knowing that it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of support there, at least at this point in time. So regardless, it's a beautiful little unit when it works and when you don't blow it up. And so I continued to balance all of the cells in the pack. So at this point, they're all at 2.8 volts, which was the original master plan. And so I also, just for fun and excitement, I went through on the laptop and I saved the log of every single cell and just numbered them 1 through 60 as I did the discharge down to 2.8. And it was interesting because even though they had been bottom balanced previously to 3 volts per cell using the just the multimeter and bringing them down as much as I could, I took several more amp hours out of some cells than others in taking it down to the 2.8 volts. I think in the last video I had taken one cell down and it was 600 milliamps or some such thing. Well, I had some when I was doing the bottom balancing that were as much as 3 milliamp hours, as much as 3 amp hours, so 3,000 milliamp hours were in the battery. So they were definitely not really as well balanced as I thought they were. And maybe 3 amp hours isn't that big of a deal, but when you're talking 180 for the whole cell, that seems like a big deal to me. So anyway, long story short, we're up and running in that we have all of these cells now bottom balanced, and I'm about to begin the process of recharging the entire pack as a unit. Now, I know that there's a concern with temperature, and so what I've done is I've preheated my garage as much as I could. Let me just go take a look here at where we're at. So we're at 52.6 degrees here in the front of the garage, and I was heating it from the back of the garage, so it should be warmer back here by a little bit anyway. So well above freezing, and hopefully once the batteries start to charge, they're going to generate their own heat and internally, so it won't be as big of a deal. I know that battery charger puts out quite a bit of heat as it's pushing through 40 amps. So anyway, so my plan is right now I have the batteries turned off. So again, we're at 0 volts showing on the meter. And obviously we don't want to turn the battery charger on when the pack is disconnected, because that would be very bad for the battery charger. So what we're going to do is go ahead and turn that on. And we should be good. Now the DC to DC converter, is hooked up, and I'm sure that this battery has drained a bit in the time. Just that little JLD meter can pretty much take this battery down from fully charged to dead in about 3 days. So there's not a whole lot of power in this little battery, so it's just amazing that JLD takes enough to drain that down to nothing. But anyway, so we can hear the hiss that comes out of my DC to DC converter as it's running. So it is currently drawing off those batteries now, but at least it's drawing them off in uniform. And anyway, we're showing 171.3 volts. I was shooting for 168, which would have been a nice even 2.8 volts per cell. But after they settle and everything, you end up with some that are like 2.85 and so forth. So this is about as close as they're going to get. But at least they all got pulled down to exactly 2.80 using the PowerLab before they came back up and settled. And I did the best I could to keep them all at the same temperature that they were, again, around between 45 and 50 degrees during the whole process. So it's as best as I can do. If I had a nice air-conditioned, heated garage, insulated type stuff, I could probably get it a little more precise on the temperature, but you do what you can with what you got. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is actually use the PowerLab now. I've identified one of the cells in my pack that had been the lowest in the back battery pack. So this little cell was at 2.6 volts when the rest were at about 2.9. So I brought it back up and then brought it down and balanced it and everything. So now it's at 2.80, just like the rest of them. But what we're going to do is use that cell as my monitor case while charging. And so what we're going to do is start the PowerLab, and we're going to put it on. Let's see if I can get this. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but we're just going to do monitor only, and verify that it is actually A123, which of course it is not. And so it's coming up as 2.818 volts, and we'll call this charge. So there we go. So it's holding steady at 2.818 volts, and it's under a modest, a very minor load from the DC to DC converter that's now running as of a few seconds ago. So there we go. Alright, so let's go ahead and move the time. It's 9:18 p.m. and we are going to start the charger. So again, this is the amp knob. We're turning it all the way down to off, all the way down to the left. We're turning on the charger, and then we're going to turn her up all the way. And so it's at 33.6. That's where we're sitting. 33.8, 33.9, and I'm sure that's related to temperature or something, but that's so 34. And so now we go over here and we take a look at the PowerLab, and we can see that the voltage jumped up to 2.94, or sorry, 2.974 fairly rapidly. And what's interesting about this little graph program is that we can do, well, amps, it's not going to show us a lot, is it? Because we're not charging from the PowerLab. So really the voltage is all we've got to look at this point. And so yeah, so let's let that do its thing, and I'll kind of keep an eye on this over the next 4 hours or so. I'm guessing it's going to take to go from empty to just about full, and obviously it's going to hit that steep part of the charge curve that we're seeing here from coming off the wall as it goes up to 3 volts and climbing. And so yeah, so it's a neat little tool, and I'm hoping to get the first one fixed, and then I'll have a backup just in case I drop a cable again and my little breakers don't do the job of protecting me. But anyway, so that's the plan. So yeah, we see that our voltage in there has already come up to 185 and climbing, and so that'll go up to about 200 and what did I figure? 205. Yeah, me and math and and the memory is not so good, but pull out my little handy dandy calculator here. So it's going for a 3.5 volts per cell times 60 cells, so it's 210. So theoretically, when I hit 210 volts showing on that meter, we'll call it good. And that should be undercharged enough, and hopefully the batteries will settle at their fully charged state at about 3.45, I believe, is where they like to chill out when fully charged. But we'll stop the charge process at 3.5 and see if that's enough. If not, we can charge it more, but I'll be very closely monitoring all the cells as we hit the top, because they're bottom balanced. The top is going to be very ragged, as far as some cells are going to be very high while the other ones are fairly low. So, and my manzanita getting a little blinky on the, is that limits light on? So we got a limits light timer blinking, which is neat because it really shouldn't be hitting that anytime soon. And we're at 188. Now it's spinning up to cool itself because it's putting through a lot of power. Can't really see it from here, but I'll have to check the volt setting on that. It's definitely not correct, but I thought I had it dialed in pretty close. So anyway, I'll probably have to play with that a little bit until I get it adjusted exactly the way I want it. After watching a recent video, Jack Rickard's EVTV video, where he described how these batteries work, I'm thinking about actually changing the charge profile on the charger so that it dumps full current right up until the point where it hits whatever arbitrary set point I've got for it, say 210 volts in this case, and then at that point having it just shut off. So basically simulating a quick charge scenario where it's not doing a constant current, constant voltage, but rather does a constant current and then says, okay, we're good, leaving the batteries significantly undercharged, but theoretically prolonging their life. And charging, completing the charging process more quickly, because it'll be running at full throttle right up until the point where it turns off. So I don't know, I'll play around with that, see if I can come up with a setup that works for me and I don't feel like it's hurting the batteries and so forth. And we'll see what kind of range I get with a mostly charged pack. Also, since I'm using the JLD meter, we can track how much power is going in here. Just for reference, I did reset this just before starting the video. So if we go ahead and check it, so it's put in 3.8 amps worth of power. So it's 3.8 amp hours rather. In the 27 minutes or whatever. So anyway, I will be monitoring things closely during this first mega charge, and it's always fun, like watching paint dry, but we'll go from there. So just in this amount of time, again, it's 9:25 now. You can kind of see how the curve is developing for this particular cell, and it's hitting 3.1, and it's still on the, I think, the steep part, or well, maybe it's getting right toward the flat spot. But anyway, very interesting little tool. I will be happy to share this graph with anybody, the raw data from the file, whatever they want, as well as maybe I'll be able to put all of the individual cells data from when I took them down to 2.8 and maybe upload that data into some kind of spreadsheet for graphing all of them together. I don't know, maybe there's some kind of trend information we can see. I'm not sure how loud it's going to be with that Manzanita cranking in the background, but I figured I'd give you a quick update during the charge process. We are currently at an hour and a half into it, and exactly an hour and a half, and not sure if it'll make it out on the camera, but there you go. So this particular cell that I'm monitoring is 3.39 or 3.38, and it fluctuates a little bit there. So that's looking pretty good. And the total attack voltage at this point is 2.39 to 2.41. I'm sorry, 204 rather. 203, 204, and kind of fluctuating there. I did resolve the issue that the charger had, where it was hitting the limit so early. When I started this process, I decided to crank the setting down to 180, and so it had hit it right away. Mainly I didn't want to accidentally overcharge the cells during this process, so I was just being very conservative. So what I ended up doing was just kind of sat here and kept raising the volt trim, well, it's a volt adjustment buttons, just kept raising them by 1 volt each time until that limits light turned off. And then as the batteries came up, they all, it would hit the limit, I would raise it a little bit more, and rinse and repeat. Right now it's sitting at some high value like 230 volts, which is not accurate necessarily, but it's not tripping the limits at 204. So, we work with it as we can, and I'll keep monitoring this very closely. This is kind of the reason why I was going to set it up so that when it hits whatever magic voltage is the top, 210 on the meter in this case, then I'll have the charger just shut off. And at that point, the batteries will be beyond the flat part of the charge curve, and that's, we can see the charge curve on this graph pretty well. That over the course of an hour and a half, it climbed very rapidly up to about 3.25 or thereabouts, 3.3, and then it's kind of held very steady all along. So right now, again, we're at 3.39, and kind of holding in that zone, and it'll creep up a little bit as we go here. But the idea is that we want to get this to 3.5 and have it kind of stay there while charging. So if we can hit 3.5 and have it just terminate, the batteries will be undercharged, but theoretically they'll be safely undercharged and not cause a problem. Just out of curiosity, again, after the hour and a half, let's take a look at how many amp hours we have pasted in here. So 61 amp hours out of a theoretical 180 amp hour cell. We're at, just kicking over into 62. So we've got a long ways to go yet, and it is coming in, as you can see, right at 40 to 41 amps. And yeah, so anyway, I will continue to monitor very closely, and I've got this set up in kind of a cool way. The laptop has VNC on it, which is kind of a remote desktop application, so I can actually see the same screen from inside my house, and therefore I can monitor this without being out into the garage. And I'm only checking the one cell, but it'll give me a really good indication of, when it gets up to 3.5, I'll come out here and check on things, and also check on it periodically throughout the evening. But anyway, so just kind of wanted to give you an update at an hour and a half into the mega charge here, and guess we'll come back when we've gotten a little further. Okay, just wanted to give you a quick update. We're a little over 3 hours into the charge process, and as you can see from the PowerLab software, we're at 3.4 volts, a little higher than that on our test cell. And on our graph, we're still in the flat part of the charge curve. Looking pretty normal there for 3 hours in. The charger is showing 39.2 on the panel, and we're getting a little flickering on the limits light. That means that it's getting kind of close to the point where it'll start throttling back the amps, and when the timer comes on there. I believe I have the timer set for 30 minutes, or whatever the shortest amount of time I could have with the thing, without having it just plain shut off. So, and as for our JLD, it's showing the 205, and we put 123 amp hours into the back, so it's definitely going in there, and that's looking pretty good. Oh, sorry, still 40 amps going in, and we're looking good. So we're kind of right on schedule for 210 volts, and approximately 3 hours in right now. I'll be keeping an eye on it, but it looks like about 60 amp hours going in per hour. No, per hour and a half. So however that math works out, probably something like 40 amps. Math, you know, go figure. Anyway, so things are going along well, and I'll check on it and give you an update as soon as something exciting happens. So again, we're at 3.4 volts at this point, 3 hours and 5 minutes in, and our charge curve is looking nice and flat. Alrighty then, here we are again. We're at 4 hours and 19 minutes on the initial charge, and we're now at 3.45 volts, give or take. As you can see on the charge curve, it's starting to reach that vertical face as it starts to go up here a little bit, much more rapidly. May be able to see on the meter we're at 210, ticking over just now to 211. Now the charger has hit 30 hit the limits, and the timer is flashing. I'm probably going to lower the charger down a little bit at this point to try to hold that voltage at 210, since it's creeping up there to 211 on us. So what we're going to do is check this here. So we're at 174 amp hours into the pack, which is definitely getting close to that 180 that they're rated for, and we'll see what happens there. But total of 4 hours and 41 minutes since I reset this unit. Still pulling 40 amps, and we just ticked over to 211. So 211 is slightly higher than 3.5 volts per cell. So on the charger here, we're going to kick down. Right now it's at 234 volts. Knock that guy down to 230. It seems to kind of be tapering it off a little bit, but not too much. Let's go down a little further here. So we'll go to 226. Took it all the way down to 200, and now we're actually starting to see the reaction from the limit light is on solid in the timer, and then the amps are actually decreasing. And so we're holding a little more steady at 210. That seems pretty darn close. The charger set at 200. Again, that doesn't really matter so much because it's not really calibrated for this kind of voltage. So you're mainly just adjusting this to get it as close as you can to where the light turns on. And yeah, I think that'll do. So it looks like it's holding it right there at that voltage and tapering off the amps. So I guess we'll leave it like that, and as long as the pack voltage overall stays around 100 or 210 and doesn't get too out of whack, that really should be fine. So I could lower it down a little bit more on the charger and get it closer to 210 exactly. Yeah, why don't we do that, just for giggles. I'm going to drop this down to 190. And now we'll see that it's dropping the current quite briskly. As you can see, it's holding at 210, 0.5, 0.4, so it's not like trying to trip over to 211 at this point, so that seems to be better. And I don't know if you can tell or not, but the fan in the charger has actually quieted down a little bit. Because it's now not working quite as hard to keep it cool, so it can throttle that fan back. Definitely makes for better video anyway, without me shouting over the thing. But yeah, so I'm pretty comfortable with it at 190 at this point. Like just walking away and letting it go. So I will continue to monitor, and the charger will shut off on its own, but I'll keep an eye on it just because I'm paranoid, and we'll go from there. So I'll get back to you later. Alrighty then, so we are now exactly at 4 hours and 30 minutes after I started the charge process, and we can see kind of an interesting little side note here. So this is the charge curve. Very flat. It was starting to go up, and then right here it kind of took a dive again. That's when I set the charger back, and just dropped it down so that it started reducing the current, and you can kind of see that there's that little mountain, and then it kind of flattened out again. So we're sitting right here at 3.44 at this point. and the charger has quieted down quite a lot. As you can see, we're at 27 amps and dropping. It has clearly hit the limit at this point, and the timer is going. Voltage, I'm not sure if you can see it from here, but it's 211.6, so it has crept up a little bit, but based on the fact that the charger is ramping down, I think that's probably fine. And the other thing is that I was checking out is these 7 cells up front. And so, my handy dandy little meter here. So what we've got is, let's just pick a random one of the non-7, one of the original 53. So this is sitting at 349. And another random one up here just for fun, 348 point whatever. Let's put one down here in the front of the pack just for fun, and so it's 347, etc. So out of the 7 that were spliced in here, so this one we're showing 345. This one over here, let's see if I can get the thing on it. Very tricky with the cable in the way. Alright. So that's this one here is 345. And this one here is my weak cell in the pack. I'm gonna stick that in there. At 3.72. So this particular cell, this is the 3rd cell over on the top row, is definitely the weakest that I've got because it hit the highest voltage first. So this is still well within the non-danger zone as far as the charge voltage, where they originally had said these cells could be charged up to 4.2 and whatever. So I think it's still okay, even though this is the weakest cell in the pack. So at this particular time, let's see what we got here. So it crept up to 212, and a lot of that's just the surface charge too. We are at exactly 180.8 amp hours, 180.9, and 212 volts. With that one cell up front jumping up to 3.7, and the rest of them kind of hovering at 3.4. I guess that would explain why we're hitting 212. But yeah. So anyway, I think we're definitely in pretty good shape, safety-wise. The charger is ramping down. We're at 25.9 amps. But it's still plugging away. It's still putting it in there. But it has hit the limits, and it's stopped. Stopped the constant current phase, and it has started the constant voltage phase. And our voltage is creeping up ever so slightly, but I'm not really overly concerned. We're definitely nowhere near the 3.6 volts per cell for all of them, and once they settle, I'm guessing these batteries are going to be right at 3.45 rather. So anyway, this will probably take a while for the charger to ramp down to 0, or for it to time out and just shut off. But either way, this is the bulk of the charge, 180 amp hours into the pack, and just about exactly 4.5 hours. So that's what I would consider full on this pack anyway. And yes, it can take more, we can trickle in more power, but I don't think that's really going to give us a whole lot, and it's just going to stress the cells unnecessarily, especially that weak cell up front. which is was showing 3.7 a second ago. Let's see where we're at now. So still 3.7. So probably going to hit 3.8, maybe even 3.9 before the charge cycle is finished. But again, I don't think we're in any danger. The only issue actually is that the the charger is going to kind of be an issue where I had to turn it down. Like if I left this set to 190 like it is right now, and then just ran the car, took it down fairly far, brought it home, plugged it in, let the charger go, I think it would stop a lot shy of 180 amp hours, because it'll hit this set point and throttle back very early. So probably what I'm going to end up doing is, just as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to try changing it so that the charger will just shut off as soon as it hits the magic limit, and I'll set the magic limit at right when the charger hits about 211 on the meter here. So when we hit 211, we just shut off and we call it good, for better or worse. So that kind of eliminates the whole constant voltage phase entirely, and so it will be leaving some amp hours on the table, but nothing's actually wasted. It just means that I won't have quite as much range. I think that'll work, and at least that might be my best option with this charger. I am looking at the Pulsar charger that Jack Rickard and Ryan Baum are working on there, and from Net Gain Controls. That should be a cool charger. A little bit dubious about the whole water cooling thing on a charger. Like if you're just using it as a charger only and not as a full controller and everything, the whole water cooling bit seems kind of overkill to me. But then again, if the thing can handle significantly faster charge speeds and stuff, I guess it's worth it. So I'll look into that and see what I come up with. But the Manzanita puts out the power and charges my pack in a fairly quick time. So anyway, alright, so we're showing 214 over there, and the Manzanita continues to throttle back. We're at 23 amps coming in. So okay then, so we just hit the 5-hour mark on the charge process, and our remarkably well-behaved cell is at 3.44 and holding. As you can see from our charge curve, we're still on the very flat part of it, and I just happened to pick a cell that I guess is very low compared to the rest of them, or has a lot of capacity rather. So anyway, the charger has kicked down. We're at, oh, there it goes, almost all the way. We're at 10 amps, and it just kind of fluctuated down quite a lot there. So we're definitely just about ready to turn off. We're dropping down now. The overall pack voltage has crept up quite a lot. We're at 217.9, 218, and we're showing 188 amp hours that have gone into the pack. And as you can see, we're now down into the almost single digits of amps coming in, which for a 180 amp hour cell probably is relatively inconsequential. And our little misbehaving cell up here, the weak one, if I can get my meter to do what it needs to do, is at 4.02 volts. So it's quite a bit higher than the rest. Again, let's just pick a random test subject. Let's see, how about this one this time? And that one is at 347. And the one next to it is at 356. And this one's at 359. The next one up is 352. So, they're kind of all over the place. This is another one of the 7. 342. So really, it's this one that's just way out of whack with the rest, and that's 4.02. However, even at 4.02, I'm not really worried about it. So what I'm going to do is let it sit overnight, and then test this particular cell again in the morning, and see what it settles to after it's had a chance to chill out overnight. And I'll probably turn off the DC to DC converter as well, just so that there's no parasitic load on the pack, and we can get a true reading of what's going on, just with the batteries settling on their own. So we're still it's flirting with 4 amps there, and up to 10 or 11, and so the charge is pretty much done. When the charger is finished figuring out that it's not going to be adding any more, it'll go to something like 0.2 amps or something, and then it just kind of sits there. And I think that's the power that the charger uses itself, just to run the fan and the lights and so forth. So anyway, the charge is definitely finished, but the interesting thing to note here is that in the last now 35 minutes, we added maybe 8 amp hours to the pack. So 180 amp hours had gone in the first 4.5 hours, and then it added another 8. Whoopity-doo. So I'm thinking that by eliminating that constant voltage phase, we're not really going to be losing a lot, and it will save a lot of time, and the batteries will just be, undercharged a little. So, alright, so we are now at almost exactly 6 hours into the charge process, and as you can see, the charger has dropped down. We're at 1.5 amps or so, 1.6, 1.7. So that's pretty much not pushing much of anything anymore. As you can see, we're about 10 volts higher than I wanted us to be, as far as that. Now, so we're at 191.8 amp hours put into the pack. And we're pulling, 1 amp, and we're at 220. So that's a lot higher than I wanted it, that I really want this at. But I think it gets down to some of the batteries just being a lot higher than the other ones. 191 isn't too much, but so anyway, our little test battery, which is a model Citizen, is holding nice and steady at 3.403 at this point. Again, 6 hours and 1 minute in. So our charge curve is looking nice and flat there, with a little peak before it started to throttle off on the constant voltage phase on the charger. And let's go have a look at our little problem child up here. So this battery is now at 4.23 volts. This multimeter won't actually show us the 4 digits for some reason once we get up into this 4 volts. But yeah, 4.24 or so. So it's still, we're now into the what I'm going to call the danger zone on this particular cell of being overcharged. 4.23, and I have the DC to DC converter disconnected because I wanted to see kind of a real total amp hours without it being affected by the DC to DC converter. But I'm now thinking that it'd probably be better to plug that back in, which is right here. It's a little computer power type plug and a monitor plug that I've got set up for that. Pop and they're back in. Okay, so what that's going to do is kind of bleed off the surface charge with the DC to DC converter, and it is going to have a little bit of a parasitic effect on the pack, but I think that might help to kind of balance things a little bit and is a more realistic representation of how it will be used in a day-to-day charge cycle. So anyway, a little nervous about this being so high at 4.2, and I guess we'll see how it settles. All the rest of the batteries in the pack, I just did kind of a random run through here. 3.9. This one's at 3.9 as well. This one's at 3.4. And this one's at 4.0. So I think overall, leaving the battery charger at 190 setting, which is where we're at, maybe a little bit too high, because during that constant voltage phase, it seems to keep on pumping in the juice, and to get these batteries kind of into an area that I'm not real comfortable with. So I think I will be happier with the charger just shutting off when it gets, about 180 amp hours in. So what I'm going to do, just because it's getting on 3 o'clock in the morning and I do need to work tomorrow. No, it's 3:25 in the morning actually. So I'm going to call it at this point, and I'm just going to shut off the charger, just so it doesn't keep on pushing current in. And I'm going to leave the DC to DC converter on, so that'll start decreasing our amp hours out of the pack. And interestingly enough, as soon as I turn the charger off, we can see that it went to 3.399 on our little test cell. So without that charge going in, we're dropping down. Now it is getting colder in here as well, now that the heater's off. And so we're looking at, it's 45.2 degrees now, and it will get down below freezing in here this evening. And but it's good to see that as soon as I took the charger off, we're already dropping down. We went from the 220 down to 218. And 191.8.
So I would say that's pretty much as full as it gets. Definitely over full, I would even say. But for the additional time, you know, gosh, what, hour and a half that I let it go on the constant voltage phase, it really doesn't seem like it was worth it. So we'll go ahead and let everything settle, and I'll just kind of take a quick peek at our problem child cell here. So it is dropping down. It's no longer the 4.2, but we'll let it go for about 24 hours, or at least 12, and we'll check it tomorrow afternoon and see where it gets to after they've had just a chance to chill out and settle, and for the DC to DC converter to kind of slough off a bit of that surface charge. So anyway, I am done for the night, and we'll let you all go. Thanks for sticking with me on the longest video ever, and probably the most dull. Doesn't get any more exciting than this, folks. Have a wonderful evening.